Visit us at Eduvvo. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.
So from this lecture we will start our Dart programming course. So in this video we will discuss about what is Dart programming language. Well, Dart is an open source programming language and it is also general purpose object oriented programming language, and this programming language is developed by Google in 2011, and the main purpose of Dart programming language is to create front-end user interfaces for mobile application and web application. So we will use this programming language to create mobile applications using Flutter SDK, and it is specifically designed for Flutter itself, and it is currently in active development. And this programming language is inspired by Java and JavaScript and C#, and it is compiled language. That means we cannot execute the code directly. Instead, the compiler parses our code into some other language and transfer it to the machine code. Just like other object-oriented programming language, Dart supports classes, interfaces, functions, and Dart does not support array. So if you have little bit experience about other programming language, so you might have heard the name of arrays. So in Dart programming language, it does not support the arrays. Instead, it supports the collection which replicate the data structure such as array, generics, and optional typing. So this was a small introduction what is Dart programming language, and now let's see the official source of Dart programming language that you can use to learn Dart programming language by yourself. So here I am on my browser, and here you can see the official website of the Dart programming language. To visit this page, you need to go to the dart.dev website. Over here you can just simply search for Dart programming language and you need to click on the first link. So this is the official site of Dart programming language, and here we have some of the features of Dart programming language, and at the top you can go inside the doc section and you can use this documentation to learn Dart programming language by yourself. And here you can just simply click on this Dart tool, language tool, and you will get the entire documentation about Dart programming language in detail. So you can follow along this documentation with the following tutorials of this course. Now in this lecture we will discuss about some of the important features of Dart programming language. So here I have listed 5 most important features of Dart programming language, and the first feature is open source. Dart programming language is completely open source programming language and it is freely available on the internet, so anyone can download it and use it for building mobile applications. Second most important feature is that it is object oriented. That means it supports all the OOPS concepts such as classes, interfaces, inheritance, and optional typing features, and it also supports concepts like mix-in, abstract, classes, and many more that we will discuss in this course later. And the third feature of Dart is that it supports all web browser, that we can execute Dart program on any browser using the Dartpad tool. And the fourth feature is that it is platform independent. That means it is supported on all platforms such as Windows, Linux, and Macintosh. Dart uses its own virtual machine, that is Dart VM, that help us to run Dart code on every operating system. And the fifth feature of Dart is that it is easy to learn. As we discussed in the previous lecture, that Dart is inspired by Java, JavaScript, and C#. So the syntax is pretty much similar to those languages, and also the syntax of Dart is pretty much similar to C language. So it makes us easier to learn Dart programming language. Now in this video we will discuss about Dart installation. So basically there are two ways to write Dart programs. The first one is the IntelliJ IDE and the second one is the Dartpad. To write program in IntelliJ IDE, we first need to install the Dart SDK, and then we need to install the IntelliJ IDE software, and then we need to integrate the IntelliJ IDE with the Dart plugin. For me this is kind of a lot of work, so I prefer to use the Dartpad solution. In Dartpad we do not have to download anything. Instead we just need to visit the dartpad.dev website to start writing the Dart programs. So throughout this course we will be using Dartpad, and now let's see what is Dartpad and how does it look like. Now in this lecture we will see how we can write our first Dart program. So to write our first Dart program, I have cleared everything from here. So to begin writing our first Dart program, the Dart provide us a main function. So let's define a main function, and to define function in Dart we need to call parentheses, and after the parentheses we need to call the curly bracket. So this is how we define the main function that will be the starting point of our Dart program, and this main function is predefined inside the Dart. So it will just identify this main function and it will just execute the command that we will write inside the curly brackets of this function. And the type of the main function is always be void. and this is also predefined inside the dart, that the main function type will be void. That means that this main function will never return anything. Now let's go inside the curly bracket and click enter, and now inside this we write our dart statement that we wanted to execute. So now let's see how we can print hello world. So in the previous lecture we have discussed about the entry point of our dart program, and I have also used some keywords like functions, void and type, and for now you do not have to worry about all these things because I will explain each of them in the upcoming lectures. So for now you just need to know that the entry point of our dart program is a main function, and this is how we define it. So now in this lecture let's see how we can create a hello world program. So for that, let's go inside the curly braces of the main function, and over here we will write a print statement, and after this print keyword we need to end this with parentheses, and inside the parentheses we have to write the data that we wanted to see on the console. So to print the data we need to write the data inside the double quotes, and inside the double quote we will write hello world. Now let's try run the program, and when we run this you see we get some error, and this error is because each statement in dart ends with semicolon. So you need to make sure that whatever code you write inside a method or a function, you need to make sure that it ends with the semicolon. So this is how we define our statement in dart. So now let's click on run, and bang, you can see on the console that we got the hello world text printed. And now let's click on format. Now let us try printing another data. So let's call print and parentheses, and inside this we will call hello world 2, and we need to make sure that we end the statement with the semicolon. And now let's click on run, and when we run this you can see that we got hello world and hello world 2. So in dart whatever we write inside the main function execute line by line. So first it will print the hello world that is coming from the line number 2, and it will just then go to the third line, that is hello world 2. So this is how the code execution of a dart program works. And now let's try printing a number. So let's click on enter and call print, and inside this we can just simply write 1 2 3 and semicolon, and here you can see everything is working perfectly. And while writing the number we can just simply write it like this without double quotes. So now let's run the program, and here on the console you can see that our data has been successfully printed. And now let's try printing a decimal value. So let's write 123.23, and now let's click on run, and here you can see on the output that we got this thing. And also inside the print we can print a boolean value, and for now you can just understand boolean values as like true or false. Let's call true, and it will be fine, and this is taking the value as boolean, that is why it is not showing error. And here you can see that the data has been successfully printed. So this is how we can print string, numbers and boolean values inside the print statement. So in the next lecture we will discuss about what are keywords in dart. So now in this lecture we will discuss about what are keywords in dart programming language. On the screen you can see that there is a table, and this has been taken from the official website of dart, and over here you can see there are many keywords that are written, and there are total 61 keywords in dart. Dart keywords are the reserved word that has a special meaning for the compiler, and these keywords cannot be used as a variable name, class name and function name. And later in this course we will discuss about variable, class and functions, so do not worry about them for now. Just understand that we cannot use this keyword to define the name of a variable, class or function. These keywords are case sensitive, so if you want to use any keyword then you need to make sure that you have to write in a proper case that is predefined by the dart, and this dart keyword cannot be used as an identifier. So here in our previous program that we have written, here you can see that we are using this void, and this void is exactly the keyword that we are using. And as we have discussed, these keywords are case sensitive, so we need to make sure that this need to be written as it is defined. So now let's replace this V with capital V, and here you can see that we got the error that the undefined class void, and now this word cannot be used as a keyword, and therefore the Dart is not able to identify this keyword. So this was a small example of keywords in Dart, and later in this course we will use multiple keywords that you have seen in the table. So in the next video we are going to discuss about the identifiers in Dart. So now let's discuss about identifiers in Dart. So let's understand the concept of identifiers with an analogy. So you're standing in a crowd and I wanted to call you. So I should know that one thing that I can use to call you, and over here I can just use your name to call you. Hey Mac, come here. Just like that, here Mac is your identifier. So that I can use, or some other person can use to identify you out of the crowd and call you and get the work done. Right? So just like that, in programming, while we write the program, we defines a lot of data storage just like the ship storing all the containers. And to get the data out of this container, we need some identifier. That could be the name, that could be the ID or something else. And over here you can see that I've defined the name of some containers such as A, B, C, D and goes on. So over here, if I want to access the content of A, I can just call the container A and get the data from that and use that, right? Now if I wanted to describe identifiers in Dart, we can simply say these are the name given to a program element, which can be a function, variable or list, or any other data structure that we use to store the data. And while we declare our function or variable, we give it a name so that we can use that particular name to call that data or a function to get the work done. So to define an identifier in Dart programming language, we need to follow some rules. So the first rule for defining an identifier is that an identifier cannot begin with a digit. That is, we cannot write it as one name or some other character that is starting with a number. That is a wrong way of defining an identifier. And the second rule to follow while defining an identifier is that we can define an identifier with lowercase or uppercase, just like the example given over here, that is variable name and capital name. That is a correct way of defining an identifier. Also in Dart programming language, we can start an identifier with underscore, just like given over here, underscore name or underscore capital name. And the fourth rule that we need to follow is that we cannot pass empty spaces between the name of the variable. For example, given over here as NA space ME, and we need to make sure that whatever identifier we defined in the Dart program, each identifier must be unique. We cannot define identifier with similar names. So now let's go to a Dartpad and see whether they work this way or not. So here I am on my Dartpad, and now let's try defining our first identifier with the first rule. And to define an identifier, we need to call where, that is a keyword. And now let's try giving it a name, that is the actual identifier for this variable. So according to the first rule, we cannot define the identifier with a number. So let's try defining a number like that and give it a value. So over here you can see that we are getting error inside the Dartpad. And now let's run the program and see the error over here. You can see that we are getting this error that this is an unexpected character that has been occurred over here before that name. So this was the first example that we cannot define the identifier with starting with a number. And now let's try defining our identifier with the second rule. So for that, let's just remove this one over here, and you can see that now we are not getting any error. And now let's run the program and we can successfully execute this program. So you can see the program has been successfully executed and we didn't get the error. And in the second rule itself, we can define the identifier name with the uppercase. So now let's write capital NAME, and now let's try running the program and it will successfully execute. And in the error section as well, you can see that we are not getting any error. These are just the warning that we are not using this name variable, so that we will discuss later. And according to the third rule, we can define the identifier with underscore starting. So here you can see, here it is working. And now let's run the program, and here as well we are not getting any error and the program is successful. And now let's write it as lowercase, and in this case as well the program will run successfully. And now let's follow the fourth rule for defining identifier. So now let's give it a white space over here and try running the program, and here you see that we are getting the error According to the fourth rule, we cannot define an identifier with a space character inside the identifier name, just like this one, NA space ME. So we cannot define it like this. So these are the some rules that we need to follow while defining an identifier. So now let's talk about built-in data types in Dart. We can also call built-in data types as data types because we use all these data types to define the variable type, and variable are used to store the values and reserve a memory location for a particular value inside the memory. And in Dart programming language, we have 6 data types over here. And the first data type is the number, and inside the number we have 2 types, that are integers and double. So integers values are used to represent the whole number or non-fractional values, and we can only represent integer till 64-bit non-decimal values, and double values are the decimal values where we can store values in decimal, and double also can store up to 64-bit of information of decimal numbers. And to define an integer in Dart, we use int keyword to define the type of our identifier, and we use double keyword to represent the double values. Now let's talk about strings. So strings are just a sequence of characters that are arranged together inside a single quote or double quote. And to define the string data type in Dart programming language, we use string keyword. And if we talk about boolean values, so these are true or false values. These are predefined in Dart. We can only define 2 types of booleans, that are true and false, and we use bool keyword to define the boolean data type. And also here we cannot use 0 or 1 to represent the boolean values. That is not the correct representation in Dart programming language. And now let's talk about list in Dart programming language. A list is a collection of ordered object. The concept of list is pretty similar to arrays, and if you have a little bit knowledge about other programming language, then you might have heard the name of array. So they are pretty much similar to the arrays. And we can store any type of data inside the list, and to store the value inside a list we need to write the content inside the square brackets differentiated with the comma. And now let's talk about the set in Dart. So sets in Dart programming language are the specific case of list where all the inputs are unique. That means we cannot store duplicate values inside the set. Instead, inside the list we can store duplicate value, and that's what differentiates the list from sets. And to create a set, we need to add the data inside the curly bracket separated by the comma, and the set comes in play only when we wanted to store unique values inside a single variable without considering the order of the input. And now let's talk about the maps. So maps are the object that store data in form of key and value. That means inside that we have a key, and that key has a value, and it is also a dynamic collection that we can store any type of data inside the value. Inside the map, it is necessary for us to define the data as the key value pair, and this key is the data that we use to get the value of that particular key inside the map. So this was a little bit basic information about built-in data types, and later in this course we will discuss in details about all these things. So this was just an overview so that you can understand what are data types in Dart, so that you can proceed with the further lecture inside this course. Now let's discuss a little bit about comments in Dart programming language. Comments are basically the sets of statements that are used to increase the readability of our program. We can use these comments to write about our variables, method and class that we are defined inside the source code, so that other person who is coming into your program can get the basic idea of about your program, what it is exactly doing. And during the execution of the program, these comments statements are ignored by the compiler. That means these lines are not executed inside the program, and they does not affect execution of our program. So in Dart programming language we have 3 types of comments, that are single line comments, multi-line comments and documentation comment. But most frequently we use 2 types of comment, that are single line comments and multi-line comments. So in this video we'll discuss about these 2 comments. So now let's see how we can write a single line comments in Dart programming language. So now let's go to our Dart program, and over here let's click enter, and here we will write a little bit about this set. So let's call this is the example of sets in Dart programming language. Now to comment out this line, we need to use 2 backslashes before this line, and this entire line will be commented. And you can see as well all the errors that were coming are gone now. And now we can just simply run the program, and we will see that this line of comment does not have any affect on our program. Now let's run this, and here you can see our program has been successfully executed. So this is how we can define the single line comments, and here also we will define a comment over here. This is the single line comment example. Now let's talk about multi-line comments. Now multi-line comments are those comments that we can use to apply comments to multiple lines. For example, if we have like comment number 1, and then we have a comment number 2, and then we have a comment number, and then we have a comment number 3. So now to comment all these lines all together, we can just call backslash asterisk, and where this entire comment is ending, we can just call asterisk backslash. So this is how we can comment all the 3 lines together without passing the double backslashes in each line. We just simply call like this and it will be fine. Now let's run the program and see. So here you can see our program has been successfully executed. So in this small tutorial, we have learned about single line comments and multi-line comments and how to write these comments. Now in this video, let's see what are variables in Dart programming language. So in programming, variables are just a named space in the memory that stores our value. So while we are running our program, we define some of the variable, and in that variable we assign some values. So Dart will automatically assign some memory space for that variable, and it will name that memory space with that name, so that whenever we need to call that data, we can just use that particular variable name to get the data from it. And for that program, that variable acts as a container that is just holding some values inside it, and the name of the variable that we will define are also called as identifier, as we have discussed in the previous videos as well about the identifier. And to define that identifier, we need to follow some rules. So in that video, I have also discussed all the rules about how to define an identifier in Dart programming language and what are the rules that we need to follow while defining the variables. And now let's see how we can programmatically define a variable. So let's go inside our main function and click enter. And over here we can just simply call a keyword called var, and after this var keyword we need to call the variable name. So in this case we will just keep the variable name as variable name so that you can understand it better. And now after this identifier we need to call equal sign, and after this we need to assign the value inside it. So let's call value. And over here, if you see, we have defined the type of this variable as var, but if we hover this variable name and see into the documentation, and here we can see that variable name type has been set to string. So var keyword is a kind of dynamic variable type that we can use to define values of multiple types. For example, over here we have defined it as a value as a string, that is why it is taking the type as a string. And if we define this variable name as integer, so it will automatically change its type from string to integer. Over here you can see that variable name is now int. But if we do not assign the value over here, let's remove this value, and if we go to this variable name, and here we can see that it is assigning the type as dynamic. So there are 2 things to remember over here. That is, while using this var keyword, if we assign the value while defining it, let's say for example over here at abc, and if we assign this value, now this var will automatically take the type of this abc, and it will assign to this variable name type. So over here you can see we got this string, and if we do not assign this over here, and if we try to assign it inside the second line, variable name is equals to 20, and if we check this, you can see that it is taking the type as dynamic only. And if we try to define another value into it and we call it as a string, then it will happily store that value inside it. And the reason is, in the line number 3 we have not assigned the value to it, and Dart will automatically assign the type of this variable name as dynamic, as you can see in the documentation as well. But if we try to assign it over here, let's say if I assign the value as a string, then the Dart will save this variable name type as a string, and in the 4th line if we try to assign it as a new integer, then it will show us the error. And you can also check the error as well, that a value type int cannot be assigned to variable type string, and this is because In the third line we have assigned this string to this variable name, and Dart is saving it type as a string, and that is why we are not able to assign the variable name as a integer. So this is the one keyword that we are using over here. And now let's try using the dynamic keyword. Now if I change the type of this variable name from var to dynamic, it will remove all the errors. Over here you can see that variable name is 20 now, and we are able to set it as integer as well. And the reason for this is we have deliberately defined the variable type as dynamic, and for the lifetime of this variable name, the type of this variable name will always be dynamic, so we can assign any values inside it. And inside dynamic we can assign any type of value, whether it is integer, double or boolean, and you can see as well over here. So the only difference between the var and dynamic is if we don't assign the type of the var keyword, let's say over here variable2, and if we don't assign the value to this var2 variable, then it will take the type as dynamic. Inside the documentation as well you can see that it is defined as dynamic, and if we try to define it a value, and then that will be changed to a string, and for the entire program we can only store the string value inside the var2 keyword. Instead, if we define the type as dynamic inside the variable name, we can store any type of value, whether it is integer, double or boolean value. We can store all types of value inside the variable name. So this was a basic difference between the var and dynamic keyword. And now the next thing that we need to remember is we cannot use this variable before defining it. So if we try to print this variable above this line var2, then it will show us the error. You can see that the local variable var2 cannot be referenced before it is declared. So Dart is identifying this variable, but it is not able to print the value just because we are not using this variable after defining the variable. So here we are defining the variable, in line number 4, and in line number 3 we are using it before defining it. So we cannot do this in Dart programming language. So to call this, we can only print this, or we can use this variable after defining this variable. So now let's print and see, and here you can see in the error as well there is no error, and in the console you can see the output is coming. Now over here, while we defined all this thing, we have discussed about var keyword and dynamic keyword, and now let's discuss about some static data types in Dart. So the first static data type is the string. So this is the variable type, and now let's create an identifier. So we'll call it as string data, and after assigning the identifier we can just call equals, and over here let's call data, and over here you can see that we are not getting any error. So the point over here is whenever we define a static data type such as string or integer, the Dart perform a type checking, and that type checking ensure that the type we have defined over here and the value that we are assigning to it has the same data type. As you can see, we have a string, and over here we have the string data only. So it will just verify this, whether this data assigned has the type of string, then only we will be able to store that particular data inside the string data. So if we try to remove this and try to assign 1 2 3, so you can see we will get the error, just because the type of this data is integer, but we are assigning to this string variable, and that is why it is showing the type error inside the console. So Dart support type checking by prefixing the variable name with the data type. So that is the third thing that we need to remember. And now let's make it as a string only. And now we don't write anything over here, and if we try to print this string data, and if I try to run this program, you can see over here that non-nullable variable string data must be assigned before it is used, and we need to make sure that the variable that we have defined must have a value before using it. Just like this, we are using this variable inside the line number 3, and we are declaring it in line number 12. So before this statement, we need to make sure that string data must have some data inside it. So Dart doesn't allow to use null values, and there is one more way to let the Dart know that we want this string data as null as well. So we can just add a question mark after this string, and you can see once we assign this question mark, the error that was coming inside this string data, it is gone now. And this is because we have informed Dart deliberately that inside the string data we can also store null value as well. So now if I try to print the output, you can see we are able to get the value as null. But if we don't write this question mark, it will show us the error at compile time only, that this string data cannot be null by default. So this is how we can, using question mark, so here I've added some comment that using question mark we can allow to use null values after they are declared. So this was an example of comment as well. And over here you can see that we have used this double slash in the single line comment, but here we have the multi-line comment. So let's convert it to the multi-line comment, and for that we can just add a asterisk after a backslash, and over here we can just add a backslash and asterisk. So this is how we can convert this to multi-string comments. And now let's see other static types as well. And the second type is the int, integer type data. So inside integer we can only store the integer values, for example 20, and we have another one as double, and inside this we can store double values. And we have also have the another called boolean type, and inside this we can only store true value or false. And here you can see we are only getting the warning such as variable name is not used, so it must be, it just shows us this thing. So let's print this thing over here, variable name, and after this let's print this as well, and also let's print something to differentiate between all these things. And after this variable name over here we can add another thing over here, and after string, after integer, after double, after boolean. And we can also print integer data, and inside this double data. And if you are wondering how I am getting all this suggestion, so if you try to write a little bit name of this variable, for example bull, so it will automatically show us the all the suggestion. And in case if it is not showing, you can just press control space to get all the suggestions. So this is how we can add all this. And now let's click on this format button to improve the spacing of the program. And now let's run this program. And inside the console you can see we got the output, and over here we are getting this variable to value, and after this we are using this dynamic example variable name. So here you can see that first we have assigned the value as a string, so it is showing us the string, and after that we have assigned the value as integer, so we are getting this integer. So this was an example of dynamic keyword, how we can use it, and we have learned how we can declare our null value, and after this integer, double, and boolean. So this was a lot more about variables in Dart programming language. And now let's discuss what are constant and final types Dart programming language. Now in this video we will learn about final and constant data types. So the purpose of both the data type is to store a value that cannot be changed throughout the program, and once we declare the value of this variable, final or const, then we won't be able to change the values of those variables. So let's first define a variable. Let's call it as a string, and that the name will be value1 and it is equal to ABC. And now to make this value1 as final, then we just need to call the final keyword, before this data type declaration. While we are using this final, it is optional for us to define the static data type, so we can also remove it, but for now we will keep it as this. And now let's run the program, and you can see the program is running successfully. And now let's try to print this value 1, and let's run it. And on the console you can see that we got the ABC printed. And now let's define a constant string. So let's call string value 2, that is equal to ABC2. And to make this as a constant, we just need to call const keyword just before the type declaration, and this is how we can define it. And also let's print it and run the code. So this is how we can define the final and constant variable. And now the second thing about final and constant is, in final variable the declaration of the value can also be done at the runtime as well. So it is not necessary to define the value at the definition, we can define it during the runtime as well. So we can just call over here ABC and it will be fine. And now let's run this, and you can see our program is running successfully. But in case of constant, we cannot define the value of this constant variable at the runtime, and if we try to assign it value, then also it will show us the error that the value has not been initialized. You can see the constant value 2 must be initialized, so it has to be initialized at the time of the definition. So the constant variable does not allow us to assign the value at runtime, so we cannot assign it like this. So we can just pass over here ABC2. And also in case of final, if we are not using this value over here, we are printing this value, so we are using this. And if we are not using this value over here, let's say we are not printing the value 1, and also we can remove this value declaration, and also we run the program, it will run successfully. But in case of constant, also if we are not using the value, then also it is necessary for us to define the value. As you can see, value 2, the constant value 2 must be initialized. So in case of constant, it is necessary for us to define the value of this at the time of its definition while we are defining it. But in case of final, we can keep it as empty. So in case of final, we only need to define the value only if we are using it, and also the value must be initialized before the value is being used. So if we try to call value 2, value 1 over here, and if we try to print this, you can see we got the error that the value must be initialized before it is used. So if I try to assign the value after the use, then also it will show us the error that it must be initialized before it is used. So we can just remove it, and we need to pass it after the value declaration only. So if we run the program, it will run successfully, as you can see. And also let's print the constant one. And now we talk about the memory allocation of final and constant. So in case of final, only if we are using the value, then only the memory will be assigned. In case of final, if we are not using this value over here, let's say we are not printing the value, then in that case the final variable, that is value 1, will not be having any memory. So in case of final, the memory is only allocated only when we are using it. But in case of constant, whether we are using the value or not, the compiler will assign some memory space. So in case we are not using this over here, then also in that case the memory for value 2 will be allocated. So now over here I am using this value, and if I try to change the value, let's say value 1 is equals to ABCD. So here you can see that we are not allowed it to change the value of value 1 because it is final now. And on the error you can see that final variable value 1 can only be set once. That means the value of this value 1 can only be set at once. So over here we are setting the value. So later in the program we try to change the value of this variable, we won't be allowed to do that. So that's the main purpose of this final variable. And also in the case of constant, if I try to call value 2 is equal to ABCD. So in constant case as well, you can see constant cannot be assigned a value. So this is the main purpose of constant and final, that the value of those variable can only be set at once. We cannot change it later. So in this video we have learned about final and constant variable, and we have also seen the properties of these keywords, and in the next video we will discuss about late variables. So you wanted to declare some variable and the values of those variable are unknown for now, but later in the program you know that the value of those variable need to come from the server or API. Then in that case you need to tell the Dart that the values of those variable has to be initialized later. So Dart provide us a late keyword that we can assign to any variable. So let's see how we can define a late variable. So let's create a string value 3, and the value of this variable needs to be defined later in the program. So we can use this late keyword. Now after this we can assign whatever value we want to assign it. Let's say ABC, and later we need to call it XYZ. So we can do it like this, and we can also print this. And now let's run the program, and here you can see we are able to assign value of this variable, and this is how the late keyword work. And now let's head over to the official documentation. So here is the official documentation of the Dart programming language, and here you can check out all the documentation of all the things, and here you can see the entire documentation for the variables. So you can go through this documentation if you want a little bit more in-depth knowledge about the variables and other topics. So this is it for this video, and let's see you in the next one. So now in this lecture let's discuss a little bit more about integer and double values. So let's clean up our code, and now we will look at how we can convert our string into integer or double value. So for example, if you have a string that contain our integer value, and that is a string, and we wanted to convert that string into a number, into integer value, so how do we do that? So let's look into it. So let's first define a variable called value1, and this value will store our integer value, let's say 123, and here this 123 value is a string, but we wanted to convert this string into a number. So to convert this value1 string into a number, so for that we can just define int parse value. We will define a identifier for it, and now we can call int. So now this int provide us a method called parse, so we can access that method using the dot sign. So when you write this dot, it will just show the suggestion. So here you need to click on parse, and inside the parse method, so we can just call it value1, and this is how it will convert this value1 into an integer, and it will save it to this parse value variable. So let's print this as well over here, parse value, and now let's click on run. So on the console you can see that we got this number, and now before parsing this value, let's print the type of this variable over here, value1, and we can just call dot over here, and here we need to choose the runtime type. It will just return the type of this value1. So if it is a string, then it will just print as a string, and here as well, after we are converting this value, we can just call parse value dot runtime type. And now let's click on run, and let's see. So over here you can see that the type of value1 over here is the string, so we got this string, and after converting this value1 to a integer, it returns as a int type, and after we are able to print this as well. So this is how we can convert our strings of number into an integer. And now let's see how we can convert a string of double value into a double. So let's define another variable called value2, and inside this let's store 2.2, which is a double value, and now let's see how we can convert it. So for that we need to call double, and here we need to define the identifier name. So let's call parse value 2, and which will be equal to double dot and here we got the parse, and inside this we need to pass the source, that is the value2, And now we can just simply print this parse value 2, and over here let's as well print the value 2 dot runtime type, and over here as well let's copy this and paste it, and here let's call runtime type. And now let's click on run. So we got the output, and over here you can see that the value to runtime type is the string as we have defined over here. And after converting this value 2 into a double value, we got the runtime type as double, which is this line, and after that we are able to print this as well into a double value. So this is how we can convert a string of integer value or double values into their respective types. And now let's see how we can convert the double or integer value into a string value. So let's define an integer called value 3, and inside this we will store, let's say, 2, and now we wanted to convert this 2, which is of integer type, to a string. So over here the type of this 2 is integer, and now to convert this into a string we can just pass a string parse value 3, which is equal to value dot value 3. And now to convert this value 3 integer into a string type, so we can just call dot to string, which is this method. So this will just simply convert this integer into a string. And now let's print the parse value 3 dot runtime type, and call print parse value 3, and here as well let's print this value 3 dot runtime type. And now let's run the program. So here you can see the runtime type of value 3 is integer over here, and now to convert this we can just call the toString method using this dot sign, and we can just simply convert this value 3 into a string. So here as well we got the runtime type, and after getting this we are printing this value. So on the console you can see that as well. And now let's copy this entire thing, and we will do the same for double values. So it will be value 4, and let's call it double, and let's pass a double value called 2.12, and here let's call 4, and here as well 4. And now let's run the program. So over here you can see that we got the runtime type of value 4 as double, and after converting this we got the parse value 4, and the runtime type is the string, and here as well we are printing this value. So this is how we can convert our integer into a string and double value into a string. So in this tutorial we have seen how to parse a string of integer into integer and string of double into double, and we have also seen how we can convert integer and double values into a string. And in the next tutorial we will see how we can perform various operations on string values. So now in this lecture we will explore about strings in Dart. So let's clean up our code. So let's first discuss what is a string. So a string is just a data type that represents a sequence of character, and this string in Dart can be represented using either single or double quotes or triple quotes as well. So in Dart we have two types of string, that are single line string and multi-line string. So to write the single line string we use single or double quotes, and to represent the multi-line string we use the triple, single or double quotes. So we will look one by one into it. So let's first define a string called string 1. So we can define this string using single quote, and let's write string 1. And now let's define another string. Let's call string 2, which is in the double quotes. Let's call string 2. So this is how we can write single line string using double quote and single quotes. And let's print this as well. Let's call string 1, and over here let's print string 2. And now let's run the program. Perfect, we got the output over here. And now let's see how we can define our multi-line string. So to multi-line string, we use triple quote string 3, and inside this we need to write the string. This is multi-line string, and end this string with triple quote. And also we can click enter, and over here we can write example, and also let's print this. Let's call string 3. So in the output you can see that we got this. This is multi-line string example. So in the first line we got this is multi-line string, and in the second line we got this example. So inside this string we can add as many lines we wanted to add. So we can just click enter, and inside this we can write anything. So it will just add another line for it. Let's call 1 2 3, and let's run the program, and it will just print 1 2 3 into the second line. And now let's see how we can define multi-line string using double quotes. So now let's copy this thing and paste it. So for that we need to just change the name, and over here instead of single quotes we need to pass triple double quotes like this, and it will work. So let's run the program, and here let's print 4 and call print. So here we got our output. So this is how we can define a single line string and multi-line string. And the second concept we need to learn about string is string interpolation. So string interpolation is just a process to create a new string by adding a string to another string, and we can use the plus operator to concatenate or interpolate the strings. So let's look into this as well. So over here we have the string 1 and string 2. So if we wanted to add these both string, so we can just simply create a new string variable called result, which is equal to string 1, and we can just simply call plus operator and call the second string 2. So it will just add both these string 1 and string 2. And now let's print over here result and print this. So on the console you can see that we got the string 1 and string 2. And now let's beautify this as well. So let's remove this result from here and add our double quotes, and we'll write the concatenated string is, and here we can just pass dollar to access the variable, and we can just call the result variable, and let's run the program. So here you can see we got the concatenated string is string 1 and string 2, and also we can add a space between this. So we just do it like this. We can add another string over here which will be empty, and now let's run the program. Perfect. So here we got the output of concatenated string. And now let's see some of the properties of string as well. So the first property is the length. So using the length property we can get the length of the entire string. So we can just call print the length of string 1 is, and we can do it using the dollar sign. We can just call string 1 variable. Now to access the length property we need to add this string into curly bracket, and using this we can just access the length. Here you can see, and add a semicolon at the end. And now let's run the program. So here you can see the length of string 1 is 10. So this is how we can print the length of any string using the length property. And now the second property is the is empty. So using this is empty property we can check whether the string is empty or not. So let's copy the same line and print this here, and we can just remove this. The string 1 is empty, and over here we can just call is empty, and let's print this. So this will return a boolean value. If it is empty, then it will return true, and if it is not, then it will return false. So in our case, string 1 has the data, so it is not empty for now, so it is returning false value. And also similarly, we have another property called is not empty, so it will just return true if the string is not empty. Here you can see we got the value as true. So now we will look into some of the methods to manipulate the string. So Dart provides us some method inside the string that we can use to manipulate the string, or we can perform certain operation on that string. So let's look into this. So here let's call print, and we will just call string 1, and now we can just place our dot sign after this, and we can see various method over here. So there are so many methods inside this, and now let's check some of these method and find out what they are returning. So let's call this to uppercase method. So what will this method do? It will just convert this entire string into uppercase. So let's print this. Here you can see the entire string is converted into the uppercase. And now let's copy this line and paste it. And the second method we will explore is the contains method. So this method takes a value, let's say s. So it will just return true or false if this string contain s or not. So in this case, string 1 contains a s value over here, you can see. So it is returning true for us. And now let's find out whether it contains 1 or not. So in this case, it contains 1. So it's just returned true for us, as you can see. And now let's explore another method, which is the substring over here. So inside this method, we need to pass two parameters, that is the starting string and the ending. So this method will just return string from a particular index to the ending index. So let's try printing this string value only, and we will not print this one. So to print this string, just this string value, so we need to pass the starting index, that will be the 0, and the ending index will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we need to pass it 5, and let's print this. And here you can see we got the output, but we need to call it 6 to print the entire string value. Here you can see we got this string from 0 to 6. So this is how we can print a particular part of a string. And now let's look into another method, and that will be replace all. So this method takes a value that we wanted to replace. So let's say we wanted to replace all the spaces from the string. So we can just call it like this. So it will just replace all the spaces from the string. And now let's run the program. And here you can see we got the output, and inside this we do not have any space between the string and one value. So this is how we can use this replace all method to replace any value. So now let's replace all n with m and run the program, and this will just replace all the n from the string to m. And here you can see we got this string as well, which has m in place of n. So similarly, the string class provides many methods to perform the operation on any string, so we can use those. But in this video I have only explained only few, so you can try any method by yourself and try playing with it. So this is it for this lecture, and in the next lecture we will discuss about Boolean data types. So now in this lecture, let's discuss about Boolean data type in Dart programming language. So in Boolean data type, we have two values that are true and false, and to represent Boolean values we use bool keyword, that is used to represent a Boolean literal in Dart programming language. So now let's see how we can create a Boolean variable. So let's clean up our code, and let's call the bool keyword, and here we can define the variable name. let's call it value 1, and we can only assign true or false, so we can write it as false or true. So these are the only two values that we can assign it to boolean variable. And also let's understand boolean variable with an example. So for that we will define another value that will be bool, and let's call it test. So we'll perform a test over here, and let's say test is equal to 10 is greater than 12. So in this case, this expression will return a true or false value, and it will assign it to test variable. And also let's print this over here. Let's call test and run the program. So here you can see we got the value as false because 10 is not greater than 12. And now let's try printing a true value. So let's call 13 greater than 12. So this is true. And here on the console you can see that we got the value as true. So now in the next lecture we will discuss about list in Dart programming language. So now in this lecture we will discuss about what are list in Dart programming language. So lists are basically a collection of ordered object, and most of the programming language you might have heard the name of arrays. So in Dart, lists are pretty much similar to arrays in programming language. So let's see how we can create a list variable. So for that let's call list, and after this list we need to define the type of this list, and this type will ensure that inside the list the type of data that we are storing will always be of string type. So let's call it as list, and after this we can just call square bracket, and inside this square bracket we can add the multiple values of string type. So let's call a, and to add the another value inside this list we can use comma, and we can add another values as well. So let's call abc. So this is how we can define our list in Dart programming language. And now let's print this list. Let's call print list and run the program. So here on the console you can see that we got our output. And now the next thing that we need to look into is the index. So index of list start from 0 to length minus 1 of list. What does this mean? So the index of list always start from 0 and its end with the length of the array minus 1. So the last index of the list will always be length minus 1. So in this case let's print the length of this list, call list.length, and now let's run the program, and here we can see we got the length of this list, that is the 3. So the last element will be the 3 minus 1. So let's try printing the values using the index. So the first value will be the 0, and the last value will be the length minus 1, that will be 3 minus 1, 2. So now let's print the values, and here on the console you can see the first element is the A and the last element is the C. So this is how we can access the particular element at any index. And now let's see some other properties of list. Let's call list dot, and here inside this we can see we got so many options, and it provides us the first property that print the first value of the list, and similarly let's print some other properties as well. So let's call last, that prints the last value of the list, and is empty, that return true if the list is empty and false if it is not empty. And also see the reversed property. So let's run the program. So on the console you can see that here we got the first element and this is the last, and list in our case is not empty, so it is returning as false. And in the fourth property you can see we are printing the list dot reversed. So what this reverse does is it reverses the entire list, and if we try to print the type of this reversed runtime type, so it will be So it will be reversed list iterable. So this is not the list. That is why here you can see we are not able to see this inside the square bracket. Here you can see this is not in the square bracket. So to convert this iterable into list, we can just call toList method to convert this iterable into list. And now if we run the program, here on the console you can see that we got this data inside the square bracket. So these were the some properties of list. And now let's see how we can perform some operation on this list. So let's call list.add. So this property we can use to add some values inside the list. So let's try adding a value d, and after this let's add some more values. Let's call add e. And now let's try printing the list. And here you can see that after adding the d and e value inside this, these values are added at the end of the list. So this add method add the values at the end of the array and increase the length of the array by 1. So this is what this add method does. And let's see how we can add elements at a particular index. So to add the values inside the list at a particular index, we can use insert method. Let's take our index. So let's call it as 0. So we wanted to add data at the 0 index, and here let's call f value and let's print the list. And let's run the program. And here you can see the f value has been added at the index 0. And now let's add another value, a value at index 4, and let's call it g, and run the program. And here you can see on the index 4 the g element has been added. So this is how we can add and insert a value. And now let's see how we can remove the value. So to remove the value we can use remove. And here we need to pass the value. So let's call a and let's print the list. And here you can see the element a has been successfully removed from the list. And now let's see how we can remove the element from a particular index. So we can use remove at, and this take an index. So let's call at the index 0. We want to remove the value from index 0. And now let's again print this list and run the program. So here you can see the element that was at the index 0, that is f, has been successfully removed from the list. Now what if you wanted to add a list inside another list? So let's define another list, and that will be of type string only. And here we can just call list2, and that will be equal to ABC and XYZ. So it contains 2 elements. So now what we wanted to do is to add this list2 inside the list1. So to do that, we can just simply call list.add all. So we can pass the list over here, list2, and it will be successfully added inside the list. So let's call list, and now let's run the program. And here you can see the list2 has been successfully added inside the list variable. So this is how we can add a list inside a list. And similarly, we have so many properties inside the list, and here you can see as well that are contains, index, at, every, expand, and you can also deep dive into each of them and see what they exactly does. So there are so many properties that I can't even explain in this tutorial. So for this tutorial we will just learn about only few methods, and in the next lecture we will discuss about what are sets in Dart programming language. So now in this lecture let's discuss about what are sets in Dart programming language. So let's first clear our code. So sets in Dart are the special cases of list where all the inputs are unique. So that means we cannot add duplicate values inside a set, and this set can also be interpreted as an unordered array with unique items, and set only comes in play when we wanted to store unique values inside our data set without considering the order of the input. So let's first see how we can define our sets in Dart. So to define a set, we can just use the set keyword, and after this we need to define the type of the sets. So let's call it as int, and here let's call the variable name, that is set1, and the set is represented by curly bracket, and inside this we can add integer values. So let's add an integer value inside it. Let's call 1, 2 and 3, and now let's print this set1 and run the program. And here on the console you can see we got our set printed. And now let's see how we can get a particular element from an index. So to get the element from a particular index, we can use the element add property that takes our index. So let's call 1, and this will return the value at the index 1, that is the value 2. So let's see the output, and here on the console you can see we got the output as 2. And now let's see how we can add the values inside a set. So let's call set1 dot add, and let's add a value 4 inside it, and now let's print it, that is the set1, and run the program. And here you can see the element 4 has been successfully added. And now let's see how we can add multiple values. So for that we can just use add all method to add multiple values inside a set. So here we can just call set 5, 6, and let's print this set. So here you can see the element has been successfully added. And now let's try adding another value that is already there inside the set. So let's call add 1, which is already there, and now let's try to print this. So in this case you can see that we have added the value 1, but here on the console you can see we have a single value as 1. So this is the property of set, that we cannot store multiple values containing the same data. So if we try to add multiple values, even if we add over here, let's call 3, 2. So in this case as well it will return 1, 2, 3, and it will exclude the 3 and 2 values. Here you can see that we got 1, 2, 3 only. So the set prevent us from adding multiple values of same data inside the set. And now let's see how we can get the length of the set. So let's call print set1 dot length, that will return the length of the set. And here you can see we got the length of the set. And now let's see how we can remove values from set. So let's call set1 dot remove, and this take a value. So let's remove the value 4 from the set, and let's print the set over here, and let's run the program. Here you can see the value 4 has been successfully removed from this set. So this is how we can remove particular values from a set. And we can also use the contains property of set to check whether a value is present or not. So let's call if it is contain 3 or not. So let's print this. So it will return a true or false value. So here you can see we got the value as true because it contained the value 3 over here. And now let's try getting a value that is not present. So it will just in this case return the false value. Perfect, we got the false value over here. And now let's see what are set operation in Dart programming language. So basically there are three operations on set in Dart. So the first operation is the union, intersection, and third one is the difference. So one by one let's look into them. So let's add a comment over here that the operation in Dart. So let's define another set over here. So now let's define another set that will be of type int, and here let's call set2 that is equal to 3 4 5. And now let's perform the operation union on set1 and set2. So to do that we can just call print set1 dot union, and another set will be the set number 2, set number 2. And now let's print this. So here you can see we got the union of set1 and set2. So union is basically a set of distinct element that belongs to set1 and set2. So the union will contain the values of set1 as well as set2. So, and now let's see the intersection. So for intersection we can just call set1 dot intersection and set2. And now let's run the program. So intersection is basically a set of common element that belongs to set1 and set2. So over here you can see the intersection will be 3 and 5 because these are the common element in set1 and set2. And now let's see the difference operation. So let's print set1 dot difference, and the second set will be the set2, and let's print this. So here we got the output as 126. So difference is basically the list of elements that are in the set 1 but not in the set 2. So the difference will remove all the elements of the set 2 that are in set 1, and it will return the remaining values of set 1. So over here we have the set 1 as 1 2 3 5 and 6, and the set 2 contains 3 4 5. So it will just check the 3 or 4 or 5. If these values are there in the set 1, so it will just remove all those values from the set 1 and return the difference of the sets. And also let's print set 2 difference with set 1, and let's click on run. And here you can see we got the difference as 4 because 3 and 5 are there in the set 1. So it will just remove the 3 and 5 values from the set 2, and it will return the remaining set that contain only the value as 4. So let's add another value and let's call it 10. So now the difference will become 4 comma 10. And now let's see the output, and here you can see we got the output as 4 comma 10. So in this lecture we have discussed about some of the methods of set, and we have also seen some of the operations of set in Dart that are union, intersection and difference. So this is it for this video, and in the next video we will discuss about maps in Dart programming language. So now in this video we will discuss about maps in Dart programming language. So map is an abstract data type that stores a key value pair, and inside the map each key occur only once. That means each key of the map must be unique, but we can use same values multiple times as well. So now let's look at the example of map. So let's define a map, and to define a map we use the map keyword, and after this we need to define the key value type. So let's call it as string, comma, and after this we need to define the value type, so it will be string for now. And now let's call it map, and it is equal to the curly bracket, and inside this curly bracket we define the key value pairs. So key value pairs are defined like this, for example key 1, and after this we need to write the value, that is the value 1. So this is how we define a map in Dart. And also we can change the type of value over here. So we can define it like int. So if we define it int over here, then the value must be of type integer, for example this. And if it is double, then here we need to define a double value only, like this. And if it is boolean, then in that case we will write it as true or false, or we can define it as dynamic. And in case of dynamic, we can write anything over here, whether it is a string or integer or double or boolean value. And now let's define one more key over here. Let's call it key2, and over here let's call false, right? And now let's print this map using the print statement. Call it as map and run the program. Perfect. We got the output on a console. And also here we can change the type of the key. For example, if it is a string, then we need to pass a string, and if we keep it as integer, then here we need to pass it as integer, like this. And the keys of the map must be unique. So if we try to pass the similar keys, then we can see we are getting warning, two keys in the map shouldn't be equal. So we cannot keep this key equal. Let's define it different. Let's define two maps for this, one for integer and one for, like, say, string. And over here now we need to pass the string. So let's call it as key1 and key2, like this. And now let's print this map2, and let's run the program. And you can see on the console we got the output. And now let's see how we can add a key value pair inside the map. So to add the key value pair, we can just let's call map, and after this let's define the key, and we got a equal sign, and inside this we can just store a value. Let's say value, let's call it new value, like this. So this is how we can store our new key value pair inside the map. So let's click on run, and let's see we got the edit or not. And here you can see that we got a new key value pair added inside the map. So this is how we can add a key value pair inside the map. And now let's see how we can access a particular value using the key. Here we have the map variable, and we can just call square bracket, and after this we need to call the key of the map that we wanted to access. So let's call 1 and click on run. And here you can see we got the value that is stored inside the key number 1. And similarly let's access over here. Let's call key2 and let's click on run. Perfect, we got the output as well over here. And also let's see some of the properties of the map. So let's call map2, and we need to place the dot sign. And here you can see we got so many options over here that we can use to manipulate the map key value pair. So let's click on update, and now let's see what this update does. So here you can see the documentation. Let's scroll a little bit up and update the value for a provided key. So we can update the value of key over here, and here you can see how to do this. You can call the update method on the map, and after this we need to define the key, and over here you can see we are setting the value. So let's follow this documentation and set a new value for key number 2. Let's call key number 2, and after this we need to pass the value. So let's call value, and here we can pass a new value. So let's call it as true and click on run. Perfect, we got the answer over here. And after this let's try to print the entire map again so that we can see the updated map as well. Let's click on run, and here you can see the value of key number 2 has been successfully updated to true. So this is how we can update the map key value pair. And also let's explore some more methods. So let's call remove, and we can remove this using our key. So let's call key 1, and let's print the map again, and let's click on run. And here you can see the key number 1 has been successfully removed. So this is how we can remove, add and update the key value pair inside a map. And also we can use this contain key that return a Boolean value if that map contain a particular key value pair. So let's call key number 2. So in this case the map contains the key number 2. So let's click on run. So it must return the true. And there you can see we got the value as true. And now let's see we have the key 1 or not. So it must be false because we have removed this from here. And also you can explore more methods and properties that you can use to play with the maps.
If you are looking for teaching stuff, education stuff, programming series, application, and Android development, coding skills, marketing skills, presentation skills, stay connected by subscribing. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.